One of the things that will be of recurring interest to us in these glimpses is theology. And so I think it will be good to say something about the nature of theology here at the outset. First of all, theology is not an instance of human striving after God. Theology doesn't begin in human effort or in a human decision to try to figure out what God is like. This is because to be human is to be already addressed by God. We were called into being when we were not, which means we have no being that precedes the call. And more particularly, we were summoned to know the Lord and to worship the triune God long before we ever thought to seek after God or lift our voices in praise. And so theology must not be seen to be the result of human initiative, but rather a response. Since theology is a response, it is therefore highly personal in one sense. Its shape. For we each respond to the particular call we have heard, and we have heard it in our particular way. And the relationship to which we are summoned is, like all relationships, unable to be repeated, copied, or transferred. Out of this nexus of uniqueness, which is summed up with the biblical notion of a stone on which is written a name for me that only God and I know, comes the unique shape of my theology. And yet, the response is public, and so it takes place and is offered to the church and the world. The church draws from it, becoming fuller, richer, more truly herself, even when this theology challenges her present forms and practices. The world is judged by it, tries to hide from it, or to domesticate it, thereby rendering it innocuous. But what it rarely succeeds in doing is to squash it. Rather, it winds up preserving within the witness of its own cultures the critique it so desperately seeks to avoid. Furthermore, theology is a response that has all the components that make up all true love. These can be summarized by a threefold desire: desire to understand, a desire for union, and a desire to praise. When we are in love, we desire to know more of our beloved. We press in, we strain for every little detail. We review over and over in our minds the slightest thing said, because it might reveal just a little bit more of this interiority that we cannot get enough of. The mind of the beloved, the way the world looks from that other perspective. Theology is pursued out of this desire, and this is the intellectual side of the theological task. A lover also has the desire for union, a longing to rest continually in the presence of the beloved, to bask in the glow of the beloved's attention and approval. This too belongs to theology, and it is for this reason that devotional works, works of piety, and even mystical visions are not to be excluded from theology. This is the affective side of the theological task. If the desire to know and understand is light, the desire for union is heat. Lastly, a lover is stricken with the desire to praise. We long to laud the virtues of our love and do so at the slightest provocation, even to the point of being obnoxious to others. Theology, likewise, when it is most itself, is driven by a need to praise the divine glory and excellence. Thus does theology lead to worship. But since theology is itself an act of love offered in response to a love felt first, it does not just lead to worship, it is itself the worship of God with our minds. We do not offer our best worship when we worship only with our hearts, an abstraction from our minds, for we do not know or understand what we do. But we also do not offer our best worship when we worship with our minds apart from our hearts, for then we run the risk of getting fixated, of being so absorbed in the portrait we are painting of the beloved that we fail to look upon the living presence of the beloved. Theology must be light, but it must ever strive never to be light without heat, the heat of devotion. For properly speaking, theology is neither the light nor the heat, but the flame to which both belong.